So we're back with Skar. Dan is still having a mental health day, and I still need to sign a whole bunch of pages. And Skar
so many pages.
Is here to keep me company for Intentionally Blank this week. And we're going to talk about something fun because we're going to talk about writing while having other jobs and things like that, right?
Yes.
Skar has had a real job his whole life.
Yep.
And me and Dan had a real job for a little while.
Oh, a long while.
A longish while. But, I mean, he sold his first book in the early
it has been a while,
20.
actually.
It's been 15 years easily.
Good heavens.
So
he had like 8 years of a real job.
Yeah. And I never had a real job, but I had a fake job that I wrote during. So I thought it might be useful to just talk about like your experience finishing, because you finished the same book several times, and then you finished at least 2 other books that I know of.
Yes. I finished a novel-length memoir.
Mm-hmm.
I finished the project that you and I worked on.
Yep.
Where you gave me the 10,000-word outline, and then...
Yep. This was one of the very early stabs at what became Adamant, which I still haven't managed to find a thing to do with. Just didn't quite work out. We sent it to my agent and didn't click. But it was one of my very first attempts at co-authoring was with Skar.
Well, you were so busy. You were in the middle of Wheel of Time at that time, which this is a funny story if we can just randomly go off, but it's about this. I had written the novel-length treatment of the outline that you had given me.
Yeah.
And we'd put it through writing group, and you had just never had time to brandify it.
Yeah.
Brandalize it. But you finally, like a year and a half after it was finished, and you just didn't have time to mess with it, you called me up and said, hey, didn't you at one point you said, Skar, why don't you just take it?
Yeah.
Fiddle with it and then, market it around.
Yep.
And I said, no, I'll wait. I'd love to be co-authoring with Brandon. And so we waited more. And then one day you called me on the phone and said, hey, it's time. I finally have time to really get after this novel thing, probably for the next couple of months. Let's do this. And I was just like, Brandon, you've reached me. I'm on Fort Bragg. I'm going to Afghanistan for a year. I'm not going to be able to participate in this. And you're just like, oh. At which point it turned into a work for hire.
Yep.
And
at which point I paid you.
Yep.
So that your
Handsomely.
time wasn't wasted.
Yep.
And then honestly, we just trunked it. We did show it to Joshua, but
tried to make it into episodes at one point.
Tried to make it at episodes at one point. I've moved it into the Cosmere. If I ever do it, it'll be in the Cosmere.
Oh, cool.
And so that'll change. In the back of my head, it's hovering there, but it's still a really cool idea. It's just never quite panned out, though we did do a short story together that was mostly you that turned out great.
Yeah. Oh, can I tell that story and correct me if I get details wrong. I do my level best, but you came to me and said, Skar, I've been invited to be in an anthology about men in power armor.
Yep.
I like what you've been giving us in writing group, and I told them I will be in this anthology if I can have a co-author. Yep. They said yes, and you said, Skar, do you want to write a story about men in power armor? And I did. Yep. I wrote an 8,500-word short story, gave it to you, and you said, I'm super busy. I read this. I like it. Send it to the editor. So I sent it straight to the editor. It's long enough in the past. Anyway. Yeah. And he liked it, came back and said, but I've got about a dozen changes that I want you to make. And I agreed with all of them. They were fine. So I made the changes in Word using track changes and then sent it to you again.
Yep.
You liked them. You fiddled with it some more yourself. Not a lot.
No, I've always been very honest with people. Skar wrote this story. This is Skar's story, to the point that whenever anyone wants to anthologize it or something, I say, you got to go to Skar. This is his story. I was there as kind of an editorial overseeing force, but it is 100%. Well, it is 98% Skar, right?
So we sent it to the editor, and it got published in Armored by a really great editor to work with. Yep. Bain put it out.
I think it's a fantastic story.
Thank you.
I really like that story.
It was fun to write. The payout for it was, can I say the number?
Yeah.
Was $500.
Yep.
Up front, right? And then royalties afterwards. I actually got a couple of royalty checks for a few cents.
Did ya?
For that. But the check went to Joshua, and he sent me $250 and you $250. literally the next time we saw each other physically, you handed me a check for $250 and said, I didn't really do a ton on this story. This money belongs to you. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I'll make my car payment this month.
I mean, it really is the way it was. Like, I thought we might be able to co-author more on that, but it turns out you just had a really killer idea for a really good story, and I really liked it. If it had been super busted, then we would have been in a place, but I mean, I thought it was just really good.
So there you go.
So if you guys want to read it, it's called HARRE.
Yes.
With periods.
Yep. It's an acronym.
And have you ever put that up, like, just for sale, like on Kindle or anything like that?
I have not. I've always been, in the back of my mind, it's like, I don't know if I can. Maybe I should.
Yeah, they only bought first, usually in the magazines, they buy first serial rights or something like that. So you should be able to just put that up if you want to.
Yeah. Well, now that's in my brain. I may actually do that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yep. We'll find a place. We'll tell people when it's up. Skar's excellent power armor short story that has coincidentally my name on it.
Yes. I've read a few reviews of it. Short stories don't get a lot of reviews on the internet. And there was one guy that absolutely hated it. That's on this end of the bell curve. And then there's another guy that said it was the best story in the anthology. And I'm forever thankful to that guy because that made me very happy.
I'm sure they can go buy the anthology.
Yeah, I'm sure it's still on Amazon. It's out there.
So, but you've been just always writing. Like, this is the thing. This comes. I mean, your father's a writer too. I've read his book.
He's got 2 books on Amazon.
I've only read the first one.
Yep.
Are they 2 standalones?
They are. They're 2 standalones. Same universe, but standalones.
And you were kind of raised by your father on golden and silver age science fiction.
Yep. Well, every time I got bored as a young man growing up, I would just go into my dad's study and look at his bookshelves and know that almost anything I pulled down was going to be fun to read. And sometimes I'd ask him for, recommendations, and he'd hand me a Heinlein that I hadn't read, or a Vance, or...
I read Jack Vance because of you. I'd never read Jack Vance, and I'd never read David Gemmell until you got me reading them, and both of them are people I really enjoy. So
that is fantastic. How many Gemmell awards do you have up on the wall upstairs?
That's right, but I wish that were still going.
Yeah,
that was the best award, the Gemmell Award, named for him, where the award was a battle axe,
a battle axe or a dagger,
or
right?
A dagger. Yep. Yeah. If you it's a little battle axe. The dagger is the stabby from Reddit.
Oh, okay.
So there's like a little battle axe and a big battle axe. If you get nominated for the Gemmell, you get the little one. If you win, you get the big one.
And you've got a big one.
And I've got a big one. Yep. It was only around for like 5 or 6 years. And they're actually like replica battle axes from the books.
Yeah. The Snaga or something.
Yes.
It's the butterfly axe from one of the characters that recurs.
From the main guy that's in more of them than any of the other ones.
Yeah.
Where they done some replicas and sold them to fans, and they had a few extra after he passed away. They're like, what if we just made this the award?
I love his stuff.
Yeah. Good writer. I remember seeing him once at convention. Were you there? Where he got up and he said, I'm basically the Louis L'Amour of fantasy. He called himself that.
Wow.
Where he said, I write stories about people that you're just not sure about, but by the end, you'll be sure about them.
I mean, I can't fault him. I don't think he was wrong.
Yep.
Were you thinking that that's a little bit, I mean, wow, what a claim to make? Or was it like...
No, in the context, this was a really good description of his work to people who hadn't read his work, right? Yeah. He wasn't bragging. He was on the panel like, how would you explain your writings? Like, well, lots of standalones, similar themes, really regular releasing them, kind of about people who are rough around the edges, but in their hearts, they're good folk. That's kind of how he pitched who he was. And I thought it was a pretty good pitch.
Yeah, accurate. David Gemmell, Gemmel.
Yep.
Is it 2 L's?
I do not know.
I feel bad for not remembering.
But you'd always been writing. How did you ever write stories while being both having a job and in the military?
Well, on deployment, I'm sure you've heard, and I mentioned in the last episode, hurry up and wait. That happens.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the hurry up and wait happens where you're just sitting in your hooch and you have your laptop. So you got 3 days, nothing's happened, and you may as well sit down and write. One of my deployments was horrifying in that my job for months was to watch a little box, an electronic box. And if certain alarms went off, I had to go do things.
Mm-hmm.
But they rarely went off. I mean, when they went off, it's exciting and you'd go do stuff, but they rarely went off. And you're just sitting in this scorching hot box on a base in Afghanistan waiting for this computer to go off. And yeah, sitting there, I wrote, a 20,000 word, what is that, a novella?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have fans? Could they I didn't ask if they have air conditioning. I know that one's just going to be a chuckle.
Yeah.
Could you turn a fan on you?
Yes.
Okay.
If you brought one.
Yep. Okay.
And it was an electronic box, so there was plenty of power piped into this thing. But the machines all created heat. You created heat. The sun created heat. Yes, you could put a fan on, but the fans are most useful when you're sweating.
Yes.
Because then it evaporates the sweat. So on the gun, when we'd be driving down places, I discovered early on that you could sit in such a way you could see your sector of fire. And if you rolled your sleeves down, a lot of guys like to have them up, and I do too, except in this situation where if you roll them down, you can hold it in such a way that the wind from your passage goes up your sleeve, across your chest and back, and out the other sleeve, which is lovely.
So
that doesn't help in the box.
Hurrying up and waiting, don't they have stuff for you to do? Aren't they go clean the floors with toothbrushes? They joke about that in movies and things.
They do, and there's only so much of that you can do, and especially in my MOS, they have other things they want you to do.
Okay,
which sometimes involve waiting for days at a time for the little bell on the box to ring, because nobody else can react appropriately when it goes off. There's very complicated things you have to do.
How did you write back when you were a writer? Because we touched on this last episode, but it's actually pretty relevant to this one. You went and became a tech writer.
I did.
Which, as you've always said, you're glad for the job, glad for the work, but it wasn't a particularly creative endeavor.
Nope. So how I wrote while I did that was I would work quickly to get ahead of things, and then at my desk, even in my cubicle, I was always very careful to sit with so that nobody could see my monitor unless they were in my cubicle. And sometimes, instead of having the latest manual up, I would have my novel, and I would just go at it. Also, just going home and biting the bullet and saying, all my writing energy is used, but nope, still going to do some.
Going to push yourself anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, working at the hotel like I did was super, super lucky as a job for me, though.
You deliberately chose it.
I did deliberately choose it. Being able to get it, though, I think I've told this story before. I applied for 2 jobs at the same time because I worked at the library and got fired from the library, the BYU library.
Because people kept coming up and talking to you.
No, I loved when people talked to me. I actually have kind of a service-oriented sort of mindset, and that would be interrupting, but I would never resent it. Like when I worked at the hotel, if people came in and needed something, that's what my main job was, right? And I wanted to be there for them. Like when I was sitting at the hotel and writing, part of the way I could, there wasn't really guilt.
Sure.
The bosses knew it was fine, but part of the reason I could tell myself I'm doing a good job is because when someone came in, I put it all down and I did my best to help them. And if I didn't do that, I don't think I could have actually written because I would have been feeling guilty not doing my actual job. And when I was at the reference desk on the 5th floor at the BYU library, if someone came up and wanted help finding a book, that's fun. Interacting with people, helping them, doing the job. But I think I've told this before, that wasn't my actual job.
Oh.
I thought it would be. That's the job I applied for. That's the job I interviewed for. But what I didn't realize is when you get that job, What you're really doing is then sitting at the help desk, and you are doing research for the librarians. As most of it involved, they would get these booklets. They're like, here are all the new books we've released, and they want to know which we have in the library and which we don't, so that they can choose whether to fill out the collection or not. Right? It's something that does need to be done. You don't want your high-paid librarians spending all their time searching. And so my job for hours on end was to sit at that desk, and it was to look and see, do we have a book, circle it if we do, exit out if we don't. Actually, it was reversed. Ugh. And hours and hours and hours just doing that. And I just wasn't very good at it because as we talked about last week, like, this is the worst sort of work to give me. If you give me something that's fully engaging, like going and helping somebody find a book, like, that's really engaging.
Sure. Yeah.
Or someone comes and they're like, hey, I need to check into the hotel. It's actually really engaging. There's a lot of things to do and make sure that they're taken care of and they get to their room. But if I'm sitting at a desk doing something monotonous that doesn't use my whole brain, but just enough of it to keep me from being able to do anything else, I am miserable. And
I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, you would sometimes come to yourself with your pen hovering over the last thing you X'd out, and you realize it's been 40 minutes.
Not really that, but I would sometimes come to and be like, I X'd that out. Did I actually look that up, or did I look up the one above it twice, right? And things like that. And like, this is why, aside, I can't do choir. Oh. The church loves to, members to go sing in choirs. You always get invited. Choir is absolute just purgatory for me.
Really?
Because doing the same thing over and over again, same song, but with enough of your brain that you can't be thinking of something else, just enough of it that you can feel the ideas waving at you, but you can't give them anything, is just absolute misery. And this job was absolute misery, so I'm glad they fired me.
Yes.
But they called me and said, you're a square peg in a round hole. That's what they actually told me.
They used that phrase.
They used that exact phrase.
Well, good for them.
And they didn't tell me that I didn't know. There was no, quality control help. Like, they said, you've been getting too many of these wrong. And I'm like, I have been? Why didn't you say anything? I've been doing this for a week and it's miserable. I'd at least like to do it well. If I knew what I would,
Let's get some feedback
maybe I can put a system into place to keep myself from, but nope, they're just like, you're a square peg in a round hole. Good luck finding something else. And so I got cut out the first week of college.
Ooh.
Back, right?
You got bills.
And I have bills, and it's like a week or two until the pull-out deadline, right? You can pull out and get the money back, right?
Yeah.
But if it goes beyond that, you're on the hook for it. And I'm like, I need a job in 2 weeks. And so I went and applied for everything. And 2 jobs I got pretty far along on. One was the hotel, working the graveyard shift at the hotel, and one was a call center for trying to talk people into giving money to the university.
That sounds like even worse than the go down the list.
Yes.
Look at books.
Yes.
Type. Yeah.
Yes, even worse. Because you're not helping people. You're trying to talk them out. And I knew that one would be miserable. Because
and it's cold calling. It's not inbound. It's outbound.
It's outbound.
Ugh.
I actually know that I hate it because when I was just one semester back from college, my family was living in Idaho. So this is after I went to Korea and came back. My mom had a job lined up for me when I got back. And it was, my uncle was in politics and running for mayor. And she's like, I got this great job for you. You're going to sit and you're going to call and you're going to ask people if we can send them material about how great he's going to be for the job. And it was awful. It was.
Thank you.
Nobody wanted to be getting the calls.
No.
And I didn't want to be making the calls. And so I knew the call center, but it's either that or I can't afford school.
Yeah.
And so
you do what you have to do, but
yeah, the lucky thing was I got both jobs. And I got called first on the call center one. And they said, do you want to take the job? And I said, how long can I have?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we'd like you to take it now, but we have a policy that you can have this many. It was like, 48 hours or something like that. But you really should jump on it. It's a good job. And I'm like, I'm going to wait the 48 hours. I will call you hour number 47 and 50 minutes. And then I just am like, I need to get this other job.
Yeah.
And then the next day, I got the other job.
The next day?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So 24 hours between... Yeah. Well, you would have written anyway. I was gonna say that, oh no, you get this job and you never write your books, but you would have written anyway.
I probably would have burned out on the other job and found something else.
Yeah,
but
it delayed you a few months.
Delayed me a few months, maybe, hopefully, but hopefully that's all it would have done.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have sucked my soul to the point that I just, yeah. But I got the hotel job and I wrote every night at that hotel job. And it is actually, it's a little more to the story that I haven't, I think, told. They called and said, we can only give you 3 days a week. We can't give you full time. Do you still want it? Yikes. And I ran the numbers and I'm like, I can live barely on 3 days it was like $6.50 an hour, right?
As long as the price of ramen doesn't go up,
exactly.
I'm okay.
And I ran those numbers. I'm like, I can make this work, hoping that I would eventually be able to go to 5 days, which about 6 months later, I was able to go to 5 days a week.
Nice.
And things like that. But did you ever come visit me? At the hotel?
I did.
I know a lot of the people did.
It was late, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had...
I had a wife and kids.
You had like a real job and a wife and kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is back when I was single. And you were the one with kids. You would bring them to the magazine.
Yep.
Little Isaac would toddle in, could barely talk, and you'd be like, "Hey guys, look at this. Hey Isaac, what do you do with a sword?" And little Isaac would be like, "You stick it in a bad guy."
That's right, son.
Mm-hmm.
And shout out to my son.
Yep.
He's in the Army. Infantry.
He's in the Army.
He went. Yeah. I won't tell his stories, but.
Nope, but he
he's out
seems
there
to be pretty happy.
Fighting dragons.
And your other son, you have 2 sons and multiple daughters.
3 daughters. Yeah.
Your other son makes swords.
Not swords yet.
But knives.
But he is making beautiful knives now. He's actually on his journey to becoming a journeyman and then a master smith.
Yep.
And yeah.
So you've got your own little, you've got the soldier and you've got the blacksmith to keep him equipped. So
yep, and 4 brilliant daughters coming up through the ranks. The 3 brilliant. Did I just say 4 brilliant daughters?
You said 4, but it's all right.
Sorry, girls. There's only 3 of you. Circling back.
Yes.
To talking about writing while having a job. That skill that you talked about, being able to bounce from one focus to another, is trainable. You can get that. So, Brandon helping a person at the desk, or Ethan responding to the little bell on the machine, once that's over, you can train yourself to get back into the groove faster. It just takes practice. So you come home exhausted after work, you can sit down and force yourself to write anyway, and it's going to suck at first, but you can get better at it.
You can. And you can do certain things that'll put you in that, oh, I write now. Make your brain say, oh, this is what we're doing? Okay, this is what we're doing. And one of the ways I find to help with that is to not let the brain do what it wants to do, which is after you mode shift, your brain wants to do something easy.
True.
That's been my experience. So you help someone at the front desk, and then you're going to go back to your writing, and your brain says, this would be a great time to check your email. You're already interrupted. Or, you know what? This would be a great time to just relax. You already got some work done and watch some YouTube or something like that. And if you give into that repeatedly, that will become your method of operations. You
can train yourself out of.
You will write, help someone, waste a half hour, finally force yourself back into it, get interrupted, and then repeat the cycle.
I think this may be apocryphal. I think it was Rex Stout, though. He wrote the Nero Wolfe books and stories. I believe it was him who said his writing habits were such that you just wrote for these periods of the day. Now, he was doing it full time.
Yeah.
But he would write and he would finish a novel. And if he had an hour and a half left before his time was up, he'd just written the end.
He'd start the next one?
He would start the next one and work on it for 90 minutes and then go to lunch or whatever. He would just, boop.
I am not that hardcore. But it is a good mindset to be in that once you finish a chapter, if you've got enough time that you can spin back up a little bit to start into the next chapter, because that'll make the next day that much easier. For most of us, continuing something that we've just barely started the next day is easier than starting
from new.
Yeah, because your brain again has spun up into the storytelling mindset, and so you start off that chapter, you're probably going to start it pretty strongly. So that's been again my experience, but it is this interesting thing where writing. Most of us can write at between 250 to 500 words an hour. Very common. A lot of people can do more, right?
Sure.
250 to 750, I'd say, is pretty average, which means that you can do 2,000 words a week on relatively little investment, depending on how fast a writer you are and how much prep you're able to do during the week to make, like if you want to be close to that 750 or even 1,000 words an hour, usually that means you're taking the time earlier in the week to jot down notes and build yourself an outline. So you're never stopping during that hour and being like, what happens next? You already know it and it's ready. You've played it out in your mind. I've said before, very important to my schedule is to go work out before I write, because that's what I'm doing. I'm playing through each of those things in my mind. So when I sit down, there's no time of, oh, gee, what would be cool next? I know each thing I'm writing that day. And so while I'm writing them, I'm focused wholly on how great can I make this execution.
Wow.
And I think that in the years where I couldn't write as much, being able to prime my brain. So that when I did sit down, I was always closer to the 1,000 words an hour. And that's 2 hours of work a week to get a novel in the air.
There it is.
Now it's 8 hours of work if you're closer on the 250 side, right?
Sure.
But it's not that much time investment if you can train yourself in the habits like you were saying.
And it does add up. I've been distracted for 20 years for reasons, but I've still continued to write and pushed at it. Nothing like the output, obviously, if I was full time.
Right.
But when problems will present themselves to my brain, and I'll chew at them in the back of my mind while I'm doing other stuff. And if it's really, mentally complicated stuff, not a lot of cycles go towards chewing on that problem, but some does. And the subconscious works on it. And when I sit down and actually force myself to just start putting words on the page, even if I don't have a solution in my mind, the act of forcing myself brings those solutions out of my subconscious. They're in there, but they're not going to present themselves unless you're butt in chair writing.
So
No, go ahead.
There's another aspect of this I wanted to dig into. It's kind of a different take on it, but is pretty important for the whole writing while having a day job. You have 5 kids, as we've talked about.
I do.
And you have a wonderful wife who wants your time and who probably deserves it because you have left for multiple years at a time.
Yes.
And you're back. How do you explain to them, all right, Dad needs this Saturday evening to go work on a story?
Oh, honestly, I don't. I take that back. I have done that in the past, and they're very, very committed to helping me. They want me to succeed as much as I do at all these things. But honestly, the real solution to this one for me has been get up earlier. When they are asleep, they are neither asking for my attention nor being denied my attention, which is hard because it involves getting up early, but it's a solution.
Would you just get less sleep then?
Or
would you go to bed earlier?
Go to bed earlier. I also work out for various reasons. I mean, part of my job description is to stay physically fit.
Yep.
1 hour a day is part of my work schedule, which is amazing, and I thank you. That happens early, and so early that if I time it right, I can get an hour or two in the morning when nobody else is awake. Now, in the military, it was not acceptable to go from working out to hanging out in my room for an hour and a half writing. There was lots of other stuff they wanted me to be doing. So I've talked about this with you guys. Sometimes when I find myself done working out and I have an hour and a half to kill, I just go to work because that's what my subconscious tells me to do. But
yeah, your wife loves that.
For some values
Sarcasm.
of love, yes.
Like when you were working for us, you're supposed to take time off equal to the extra time you have to put in, such as sitting in the evening, being on a podcast when, but
it's I'm getting used to it. I'm getting better at that.
Yeah. The military isn't very big on, oh, you worked extra this weekend? You should just take off a few days. They do that all the time, don't they?
Yes, all the time. That's very common. Yeah. So writing with a full-time job is tough, but there are solutions.
Are you working on something right now?
I am working on the final, I say final, a major edit to that book that you've referred to that I've finished 3 times and gotten really good feedback from my agent, Joshua, who I met. I introduced you to Joshua, right?
You did introduce me to Joshua. You came running down the stairs at we were staying at your cousin's house.
Yes.
Because
my brother's house.
Your brother's house? Okay.
Yeah.
The Nebula Awards were in New York.
Yep.
And Dave, one of our mentors, said, hey, you guys should go to this. And I'm like, I can't afford this. And Skar, you're from Jersey? You're like, yeah, I can get us there. I can get us a free, a floor to stay on for free.
Yes.
And I can help us navigate the trains to get into this thing. So all we have to do is buy our tickets in the door.
Yep.
Which was pretty cheap for students. It was like, just like $30 or something. So that's all we had to do. And of course, airline fare, which was expensive, but helped us save some time. We go to the Nebula Awards. I'm sitting in the bar, twiddling my thumbs, never having really had to go in a bar and make small talk before.
Yes.
And you come running down the steps. And you're like, I met Simon Green's agent. We both really like Simon Green. Blue Moon Rising and the Hawk and Fisher books.
Yes.
And you grabbed me and towed me up the stairs and introduced me to this guy who eventually became my agent and then yours.
Yep. So book's been back and forth to Joshua several times, and every time it comes back, it's got a major suggestion that is really a good idea, and I'm putting into place the latest one. I won't say the last one, the latest one. I hope it's the last one because I think it's really good. It's coming into shape, but that's what I'm working on.
It's a fun book. Do you want to say anything about it, or do you want to leave it quiet?
Oh, it's far future military science fiction. Men in power armor.
Men in power armor. Yep.
Ben's read it.
How is it, Ben?